Hello and welcome to Revising for Exams in English Literature with me, Matthew Martin. This is a presentation aimed particularly at my third year students. So let's get started. Okay, part one, revising with questions. What this means is that you do not want to go about revising randomly. Don't just start gathering quotations from your novels and from critics and so forth. You want to guide your collection of quotations by looking at past paper questions. So once you have the past papers, you can proceed with confidence because the exam is not intended to surprise you or throw a curveball at you. What it will do, possibly, is give you a question that is phrased slightly differently or uses different wording, but the themes and the ideas are all connected, and it's up to you to think on your feet and make those connections. So here are the main things, and Hamlet here is saying, alas, poor Yorick, where can I find past exam titles? Try Queen's Online or the library. So you decide which text you're going to write on. For most third years, that's already sorted for you, because if you did an essay on a text, you cannot then do that text in the exam or you'll get a 0. You gather together past questions from exams on those authors. These are available in Queen's Online or the St. Mary's Library. Ask if you get stuck. You then organize your notes according to the key themes and arguments as presented in those questions, and you collect quotations from primary and secondary texts in relation to those particular arguments. So it's all very organized and should not feel overwhelming at all. So just remember, for you guys, deciding your text is not difficult. If you wrote an essay on Forster and one on Huxley, well, then you're doing Morrison and Steingart in the exam, okay? Don't write about an author twice or you'll end up with a 0 on that part of your exam, and that would be a catastrophe, so don't do it, okay? Clear enough? Hope so. Okay, so let's say we choose the following. We're going to do Huxley's Brave New World, and we're going to do Steingart's Super Sad True Love Story. And there's Gary Steingart going, boy, that's a relief. I feel better about this exam already. I'm ready to plow on with my revision. And he says, I'm pleased that I made the final list. So we can start revising properly now. What do? Okay, well, let's start with Super Sad True Love Story, and we're going to gather some past questions and think about past themes that we've talked about. So here's a question. Super Sad True Love Story charts how our society's obsession with technology and data results in an inability to form meaningful relationships with others and sometimes even ourselves. Discuss. And we also can look at themes which arose in essay titles and lecture notes, things like, we talked about life, immortality, and the meaning of life. Reading, what's the future of reading? The idea of big data and little data and the way those things are changing the way society works. So you pile all those out there. Next step, we pick out key terms in each question. I recommend no more than, 3 at the max. 2 is good. 4 is, you're starting to get unfocused there. So have a go and see if you can pick out the key terms in the question below, and then pause the presentation and see if you selected the same key terms that I would have, okay? And here we go. Let's check and see what you got. Okay, I highlighted technology and data, and I'm kind of grouping those together. I'm going to treat those as kind of one issue. And then I highlighted the word meaningful. You may have highlighted relationships, and that's fine. But it seemed to me that what this question was really driving at was not just any old relationships, but which relationships were meaningful. Because some are just kind of social media relationships. They don't really seem to go beyond that. And I highlighted the idea of relationships with others. I'm thinking to myself, if I have time, I'll get to the idea of relationships with ourselves, but I'm trying to prioritize here. So you might have highlighted things slightly differently. It's not the end of the world if you did. This is just a framework that you can do your planning around. Okay? Now, so I put technology and data, meaningful relationships, and the idea of understanding others is how I'm going to spin that. The reason I'm doing that, I'll just give you a preview, is because I know Steingart thinks that the novel is a real test of our human ability to understand other people. You know, to sit through 200-300 pages of a novel means you're not on Facebook, you're not selling yourself to the world, you're listening to other people's problems, okay? So we start organizing our ideas with supporting evidence around these key themes, and I use separate stacks of paper for each theme. So here we go. Here's a piece of paper on the whole topic of understanding others, and I try to include quotes and analysis of the quotes so that I can use those together in my essay. So what I've written here is the novel as a form is a test, in Steingart's view, of our ability to empathize with others. And so here's a bit of a quote I'm using. Eunice's world, says Steingart, is one, quote, where contemplating, thinking, doing anything other than shopping quickly and rating other people all the time is gone. Okay, so, you know, contemplating, thinking, everyone is texting quickly around her and posting bursts of video, but she's still smart enough to be able to put her thoughts into language because she writes fairly extensive emails, okay? And that's a test to Steingart of whether we're still able to connect with other people through language. Or another one, in Super Sad's America, where the written word is nearly dead and young people complain that books smell of, quote, old socks, Lenny writes his narrative in a series of diary entries, and that in itself is a sign that we're being asked to empathize with Lenny, and Lenny is not that likable. So again, those are sustained forms of text. So I've put those two quotes down and those two ideas as something I could use in an exam if I'm asked about our ability to empathize with others. So you then want to reduce all your reading, your notes, and your ideas into these little packets of quotes. So there's a second packet there on the practice of reading, and it says, you know, the reading that individuals do in this novel almost always is online and in conjunction with digital technologies. So there's a whole little bit of an essay on that. You can pause this presentation and read that. Or the theme of the fall of America. We've talked quite a bit about that. And here's a quote I've used that makes reference to another novel by Steingart. In an earlier novel called Lake Success, Gary Steingart wrote of his arrival in the United States in 1979 as preceding what he thinks now of as the last 20 years of the American century. So it's like in his view, from 1980 to 2000, that was the last time America was on top. He's had his eye on the fall of America for some time, in other words. Okay? Now, once we get all these different packets together, I staple my one on technology all together. I staple the one on the idea of reading together. I staple together the thing about the fall of America. Whatever other themes I have. Now, I don't really need to go back to the novel. I have these packets of notes that I can review at my leisure coming up to the exam with quotes all linked to the key themes. They become like little Lego bricks that in the exam you can start to snap together in ways that you think are interesting. You're not just regurgitating a pre-prepared essay. No, that would be horrendous. But you're taking these little Lego bricks and you're making them fit the question you were asked. Just remember, your notes should always be aiming to connect quotations, ideally from the primary text, but also from critics, to key themes. Don't just collect random quotes. Random quotes are useless. So if the theme the question gives you is something about life, immortality, the meaning of life, then you wouldn't start with this quote. Look at this. This comes from an article about Steingart, and it says, while most people squandered their time during the pandemic, Gary Steingart wrote a novel in 6 months. That's his latest novel. It has nothing to do with Super Sad True Love Story, nothing to do with life, meaning, immortality. It couldn't be more irrelevant. Don't do that. I see it all the time at the start of exam answers, and it's just a knee-jerk kind of panicked reaction. You won't get any points for that. What about this quote? Human life becomes extended infinitely in Super Sad True Love Story. Well, they hope it will be. But that is only as a digitized data assemblage. That is a big collection of data. Like, we may live on forever, but it'll only be through our Facebook page. And that data can then be broadcast to others with things like hotness quotients. So now I'm getting closer to the idea of what makes life meaningful. Okay, so it's connected to the theme directly. It quotes the idea of hotness from the primary text. It's a much more relevant opening to my exam answer. This approach also lends focus to your outside reading, so you don't need to read every article you can get your hands on about Steingart or about Super Sad True Love Story. You're looking for good resources that will help you with key themes or give you enlightening background information that relates to those themes or which makes interesting connections to those themes. Okay, so we don't just go gathering randomly and throwing things into our basket. We are guided by the key themes and questions. Okay. Now, I've had some questions from students which I want to answer here. Someone said, do you have to quote critics in the exam? Answer, no, technically. I have occasionally read first-class answers in an exam that made no reference to any critics. But I have to tell you, that's rare. I suppose I'm wondering, why would you not want to quote critics? Wouldn't you want to know what a professional critic has to say about the themes you're studying? Isn't the professional critic likely to make some effective points about the text that you wouldn't have thought of? Mightn't they point out really good quotes that you would have missed? I'm guessing they would. Now, does that mean you should just go crowbar critical quotes into your essay, whether they're relevant or not? No. Nobody's counting how many critics you quote. They're only reading to see, does your argument make sense? Do you provide good evidence? Do you show signs of meaningful thinking? I would think that quoting a critic is probably going to be part of that. Someone asked, what if the themes you've revised don't come up in the exam? Well, then you didn't study all the themes available to you in past papers. Realize as well that not every theme you study is going to come up explicitly in the exam, but they're all linked, and you can connect them logically and interestingly, just as we demonstrated in today's discussion how a question on data and technology could be linked to the ideas of the novel and empathy. You know, that digital communication does not promote sustained attention to other people's lives and problems. And as I've said before, this is not like an A-level exam where you're sitting there thinking, oh, I hope Eunice gets mentioned in the exam, or that bipartisan leader Rubenstein gets mentioned. It's not that kind of an exam. The question will focus on general themes, and then it's up to you to show off what you know and to demonstrate how well you can link your knowledge to the question. Another question, how do I know when I'm revising whether I am covering all the themes? Well, because you've checked the past papers, and because you took good notes all year, and because you're working in a group with other students and you're supporting each other in your preparation. In other words, you're checking. Did you get that theme? Did you cover that theme? What do you have on that? Good, great. Or also because you emailed me just to ask or discuss it. So that's how you know you have all the ground covered. Someone asked, when you're quoting the primary text or even critics, do you have to cite things the way you would do in an essay? No. You do your best. Give your source as clearly as you can, but you won't be marked as to whether you've used MLA style or not. That's just for coursework exams. When quoting the primary text or critics, does the quote have to be completely accurate? No, it's not a memory game. Do your best to make them accurate, but small errors will not be marked down significantly. Okay? If you just make up a quote out of thin air, that's going to count against you. But as I said, it's not a memory test. Ah, good. Exams are so much fun now that I know how to revise effectively. Note to self, lie and tell Chad the party's been canceled. Okay, you get the idea. That's how to prepare. Next, we find out, what do you actually do in the exam hall? I will see you in part 2.